In the beginning, you're like, how am I going to find a printer? How am I going to find an editor? How much should I pay my editor?
Do you have a go-to method of note-taking?
I wrote Admitted over 9 months based on obviously my experience of moving to America for grad school at Columbia University. The 5 reasons is the very first step. And then there's 10,000 steps beyond that you have to take in writing. I've tried working with a marketing agency once. It didn't really work out for me. I felt like the money was wasted.
What can you tell us about somebody that's, looking to self-publish?
Yeah, I got approved for something called the UK Global Talent Visa.
Given a chance to talk to Stephen King, I would not have him on this show. Particularly, I would still talk to him, obviously, because he's a legend.
I've done cold outreaches for raising money.
Just trying to understand kind of your O-1 visa journey and how a book can or cannot help with that.
The next book that I'm working on is called 1,000 Days of Love.
I think it almost sounds like a writing version of Y Combinator. Welcome to the Ready Set Do podcast, where we learn from journeys of not experts who are just 2 steps ahead of us. I'm Naman Pandey, and in this episode, my guest is Soundarya Balasubramani. Soundarya is the founder at unshackled.club and the author of 2 books, Unshackled and Admitted. Today's discussion is a masterclass for anyone that's interested in writing and publishing their own non-fiction book. Although we do briefly touch on Soundarya's next novel, which falls into the realm of some fiction as well. We go over all the steps that you need to take to write your first book, including note-taking and consistency, various choices for how you want to go about with publishing, marketing, as well as optimizing for sales using what is called a book launch. In keeping with our theme of learning from somebody that's just 2 steps ahead of us instead of an expert, my goal with this episode is to highlight Soundarya's journey across the writing and publishing of her 2 books and what we can learn from. This is the Ready Set Do podcast, and to support me, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and or leave me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify. And now, my dear friends, without any further ado, my conversation with Soundarya. Let's talk about writing. I want to give you some context here before I jump into my first question. And I think this hopefully you will be able to relate to, because I'm talking about your book, Admitted. And the reason I bring that up is I, in February of this year, so just 4 months ago, had a master plan to write a book, which would be, a how-to for international students that come into the US and that try to navigate all the various, things there are to navigate. So from courseware to housing to moving, pretty much anything under the sun, social life, relationships, all of it, money, taxes. And this podcast, kind of in a very weird, true to my tech pro roots, pivoting way, evolved out of that. So I guess my first question to you is, um, what can you tell us about writing nonfiction? What goes into sitting down and taking all the ideas in your head into, a manuscript, so to speak?
The first step, honestly, is why do you want to put yourself through writing? Because it's torturous work. It's staring at blank sheets. Although with the advent of AI, maybe that's not true anymore. But still, it's still. There's a famous quote on writing where this author writes, "Coal mining is hard work. Writing is just downright torture." Just a funny quote. I don't agree with it, but so I think the question is, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to write a book? A book is not like a blog post or even a long form essay. A book is ideally, if people followed this, every book out there would have a pretty voluminous amount of insights, resources, details, or stories in them.
Mhm.
I think a lot of books could be blog posts. A lot of books don't even have to exist. There's nothing new in them. And so yeah, I think the why is very important for anyone who's
I
thinking
see.
of sitting down and writing. And one of my friends once told me, which I really love this framework, is come up with 5 mutually exclusive reasons why you want to write this book. For
Mhm.
example, let's say one reason is I want to capture everything that I've learned in the last 5 years in one place.
Mhm.
Very fair reason. Another reason could be I want to help people. I genuinely think what I'm going to share is going to help people who are reading this. Third reason would be I want to make money from this. Although most authors don't really make that much money. Fourth reason could be um, I think publishing a book and having it next to my name will help me get speaking opportunities and other consulting opportunities.
Sure.
But then again, you see how that fourth reason is similar to the third reason. It helps you make more money, that being the reason. So, like this, coming up with at least 5 mutually exclusive reasons that don't overlap is helpful, because then you know that you do have a strong why as to why you want to pursue this. So that's my first tip for anyone who wants to write a book.
So, on that same note, from some of the reading that I've done on writing, most importantly, I guess probably the most influential book when I went down that rabbit hole was On Writing by
Stephen King, yeah.
Stephen King, right, right. On Writing, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's widely regarded as, like the Bible for writers. What if I have those 5 reasons, like the ones you referenced? Some of them were common for me. What I was not able to do though was to have throughput or to have an output every day like you're told that you're supposed to have.
Mm.
So would you agree that if you just have those 5 reasons, that's normally enough for most people, or is there a
Oh,
framework that makes you sit down and forces you to make throughput every single day?
what I meant was the 5 reasons is the very first step.
Okay.
And then there's 10,000 steps beyond that you have to take
Okay.
in writing. So I just meant before you start climbing a mountain, it's probably good to understand why am I doing this in the first place.
Hmm.
But if we're talking purely, how can I get more words on paper? I'm not a traditional writer, and I'm going to give this caveat because, see, Stephen King is an excellent example of someone who wakes up, goes to his desk, and then spends 10 hours writing. Like that's what he did for a very long time and probably still does. I'm not like that because I juggle the role of writer and a few other roles
Hmm.
in terms of being a founder, content creator, project manager, and so on. So from my like version of writing, the way I like to do things is, number one, I like to work on multiple articles at once if I'm working on it. I guess in the form of a book, this could be working on multiple chapters instead of
Chapters, yeah.
being
Hmm.
pigeonholed into just one. I guess it's easier for nonfiction than fiction, probably, because fiction, you need
For
to write a
sure.
story.
For sure.
Second is one of my super skills, meta skills, is I'm really good at capturing ideas and note taking as they happen. And I say this with so much confidence and overconfidence because I know most people are not very good at it, and I've seen this in observing people around me. We get so many ideas on a daily basis if you really think about it. Like, let's say you just read an article. It was very insightful. You read this article, and then you get a phone call that you have to take. And you take the call and you completely forget about this article and you move
Yep.
on with your day. But what happened to all those insights that you had? It's not captured anywhere and it's going to leave if you don't capture it. So I think, yeah, getting better at capturing the insights as they happen in that lightning stroke, lightning bolt moment is very important. And putting in that extra 5 minutes or 15 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever it is, to sit down and write it then and there, you're essentially um, piecemealing your work. For example,
Hmm.
instead of writing a book in 5 months by sitting down every single day for 10 hours, you're writing a book over 3 years by capturing ideas like 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. And of course, at some point, you're going to have to sit down and just do the hard work and write, right?
Hmm.
But I personally think, even for my current book that I'm working on, which is a novel, I haven't formally begun the writing process. But in some ways, I actually already have tens of thousands of words in my Roam workspace that I've captured. So I'm not starting from scratch. I have a
Hmm.
lot to work with already. So that's the second skill I would get better at if I want to be a writer.
That's awesome. I love that. And couple call outs there. So the first, you referencing the fact that you're not an expert at writing is actually perfect because that's the very theme of the show where, we actively avoid talking to experts. Given a chance to talk to Stephen King, I would not have him on this show. Particularly, I would still talk to him, obviously, because he's a legend, but it would not be a right fit because, as you referenced, we're just trying to learn from people that are just 2 steps ahead of us. Secondly, what I wanted to ask was, do you have a go-to method of note taking? So I was recommended this like little journal to carry around on my walks and such, which I use from time to time. It's
Mm.
like fairly effective. The thing I struggle with that is indexing. Like, how do I find
I
out
know.
a particular
Yeah.
thing? So, what's your go-to tool stack for note taking?
Um, right now I only capture in two places, and you'll know why two places soon. The main place is Rome Research. Rome Research is a bi-directional note-taking app.
Okay.
So imagine what if you had a personal Wikipedia where every single page in that Wikipedia is all interconnected. So currently, if you go to
Hmm.
Wikipedia, and let's say you go to like Indian history Wikipedia page, you'll see like 100 links in there, but that take you to 100 different pages. But if you go to those pages, they're not going to reference Indian history back. So
Hmm.
it's unidirectional. But the way
Interesting.
Rome works is it's bidirectional, meaning any page, anywhere that I mention the word Indian history across my like Rome workspace will come under the Indian history page. So this way,
Gotcha.
roaming within my like second brain becomes very easy. And I know there's a lot of controversy around using the word second brain, but I just think of it as like second brain meaning a place where I've captured years worth of ideas that I've
Hmm.
gotten over the years, a year's worth of knowledge and information and decisions I've made in one place. So right now I've been using Room for more than 4 years. So I have probably over 1 million words that I've written in there in the last 4 years. So I think that's my primary place. Everything that I generally take notes on goes to Room in the end. The second place is my notes app on iPhone, only
Hmm.
because sometimes I get ideas that are very, very short. For example, I'll tell you the last one I wrote down in my so I wrote, and this is like a page that I have in my iPhone called Third Book Musings. Okay.
Nice.
So here there's a lot in there, but when I go to the very last thing I wrote, I just literally wrote the sentence, "You gave me infinity in 1,000 days." That's it. Just one sentence that I was Chuma on a call with a friend, I was thinking out loud, and I loved this sentence. And I'm like, I need this to go into my book somewhere. So I quickly captured it. So you see how, in like a very weird way, I've probably written one sentence of my book by just doing that.
Without even realizing that you're making progress towards your book.
Exactly. Um, and
Can
so
you?
I would
Huh?
recommend, just to like summarize that, obviously use your phone for quick note taking because it's more convenient, but make sure that everything always funnels back to one place that is properly indexed.
Right.
And I personally would not use pen and paper just because it adds so much friction in moving it to a digital forum like later on.
Yeah.
But if
It's
you're willing to put
impossible,
that effort,
pretty much.
yeah,
Yeah, like the more voluminous it becomes, the lesser odds you have ever of seeing that in digital form. Some phones or some apps nowadays do handwriting transcription, but they're way like there's many years I feel like before that can
yeah,
be, reliably something we can trust. Something you said
yeah.
caught my attention. You said it's almost controversial to use the term second brain. Admittedly, I'm not familiar with what that entails. So, do you mind drilling down on that just a little bit?
Uh, I mentioned that because Second Brain became hugely popular within the personal knowledge management community. About four
Okay.
years ago, when Rome was introduced, Rome became popular. Um, Tiago Forte, who is this productivity coach slash writer,
Mhm.
he published a book called How to Build a Second Brain.
Okay.
Um, and when I said controversial, what I meant was it's obviously not an actual second brain, meaning it's
Okay.
obviously a lot less complex and much
Hmm.
more simple. And it's really just a note-taking database, nothing fancy. So I think some people feel like the term is, used in a very clickbaity way
Okay,
to
I see.
get
I
people
see. I see.
to check it out. That's what I meant.
Gotcha. Do you mind talking just a little bit about Admitted and what it covered? And maybe you could end with what some of your biggest learnings were from writing Admitted that you then maybe went on to use when you wrote
Oh yeah. So in one sentence, Admitted is an all-in-one nonfiction guide for
Hmm.
anyone who wants to study abroad, and especially for those who want to study in America.
Okay.
I wrote Admitted over 9 months based on obviously my experience of moving to America for grad school at Columbia University, but also it's not my story in the book. It's really stories of many, many, many students who've come here that we interviewed, and we also just put everything that we could think of in terms of insights in one place. And you said you're trying to write something similar, and I hope you do, because just because I wrote Admitted does not mean that any way you shouldn't write what you're trying to do, as long as you have your five whys.
Hmm.
And so that's Admitted. What I learned from Admitted for Unshackled, I learned the end-to-end process of self-publishing. I mean, it's a maze, right? In the beginning, you're
Yeah.
like, how am I going to find a printer? How am I going to find an editor?
Right.
How much should I pay my editor? How much
Also,
should I pay
who
the editor?
designs the book cover? How does that happen?
Who designs the cover, right? Even simple things like, how do I get a barcode for a book? I had to figure that out. What is the ISBN number for
Right.
the book?
Right.
All these little things. I think once I was done with Admitted, I knew. Like right now, I can tell anyone who wants to know how to do it.
Hmm.
Um, So that's what I learned from Admitted, the confidence and knowledge that I can do this. And obviously, also the confidence that I can write a book, because
Right.
until you write your first
It's a
book,
huge deal.
and also the conviction that I love writing. I love writing. I love publishing books. And I want to see myself do this for life. I mean, that's not something that comes unless you actually do it, because once you do it, even though it can be torturous at times, you look back and you realize that you have this deep satisfaction from having toiled the last 9 months to create this thing that's right now out there. Like your baby, your brainchild is out there in the market. And so
Hmm.
I think it also made me realize I really do love writing books and writing in general. So yeah, those are all some things that Admitted gave me.
Awesome. That all checks out. And yeah, I mean, given that it is funny when I discovered that Admitted the subject matter for Admitted was pretty much exactly verbatim what I had in mind. It was good to know that clearly this stuff is important, which is why there is material on this already. But just to shift gears a little bit, you referenced earlier that you're not just a writer, you're a content creator, a solopreneur, if you will, and wear a bunch of difficult hats. The thing that I found myself wondering, which kind of led to this pivot from the book to this podcast, which are admittedly two very different things. There's some overlap, sure, but for the most part, they're two very distinct things. What is your take on one form of one of those forms of media being better or worse than the other? So I guess what I'm getting at is, say, pick any chapter from Admitted. Would you argue for or against that the same chapter summarized into a 15-minute YouTube video, if at all that's possible, would be better or worse for a consumer that's looking to learn from all the insights that you reference that currently exist in that particular book chapter?
I think I think we can even let's reframe the question.
Okay.
Instead of saying better or worse, maybe
Mhm.
the question could be, do you think there is value in recreating each chapter from the book into a 15-minute YouTube video? Absolutely. I mean, the value is, at this point, it's obvious that people watch YouTube videos more than they read books, or a larger portion of people who have access to the internet watch YouTube videos than they read books. And so, from that standpoint, it's definitely going to reach more people. It's easier to digest, and so on. So, I think the question is not better or worse. The question is it worth doing in the first place? Is it worth,
Gotcha.
I think they call this, oh, I can't believe I forgot this. Uh, this process of recreating the same content in six different mediums. Like maybe make a 30-second
Repurposing?
reel,
Is it just
content
repurpose?
virality or something. So
Okay,
there's a
gotcha.
specific term for this. But
Okay.
yeah, so if that's your question, then yes. Is it better or worse? I think that's not even the right question
Yeah.
worth
So,
answering.
so just for context, I guess what I meant was in terms of the creator. So, you know how when we write something, we automatically ensure that whatever we're writing about, at least in our own heads, is 100% crystal clear. Like we understand it deeply enough, because if we don't, then it would not translate well on paper in the first place. So, I guess the better or worse was positioned from a self development perspective more than an audience
Mm.
retention slash help perspective. Does that kind of make more sense?
Self-development for the author
Yeah,
or for
exactly.
whom?
For the author.
So okay, so I guess what you're asking is, will I grow more as a content creator or a writer if I were to write a chapter versus if I were to create a YouTube video on it,
Yeah,
summarizing it?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
figured I'd
I mean,
ask you because you do both. I only do one
yeah.
of them so far.
Um, yeah, I personally gravitate towards writing more than video creation. Um, because I really enjoy entering the flow state. I really enjoy being in deep thought, and I don't get to do that often. Sadly, I mean, I'm hoping to change that now that I'm working on a book again. But over the last year, I haven't really had the chance to just, disappear into your own thoughts and to transcend and to just be in that zone of deep thinking and flow and engaging with your mind. I think that doesn't happen in a YouTube video as much as it happens when you're writing, because you also see that in a YouTube video, there's a lot of external factors to think about,
Mhm.
especially if you're interviewing someone. I mean, keeping that aside, even if you're doing a long form video, now you have to sit in front of a camera. You have to make sure the camera is recording and there's no problem there.
Yeah.
You have to look at your script and read off of it. Then you have to make sure you don't stutter. And if you do, you have to. So there's so many things that could go wrong versus when I'm sitting by myself, staring at my computer screen or my whiteboard and just thinking. So I mean, I think, yeah, writing, I personally think writing is more useful for people to grow than creating videos.
Makes sense. And I think I don't know if you've read Deep Work, Cal Newport. He talks about,
Yeah, I have.
yeah, okay. So there, I feel like essentially what you were referencing is there is very little chances of somebody entering or basically doing deep work in front of a camera while they're trying to, look presentable, appear friendly versus, just locking themselves in a cabin in the woods and just writing for 5 hours. Like those are two very different
Yeah.
states of
And
output of.
the interesting thing is, once Sam Harris mentioned in a podcast, or actually it was a debate, I think, where he said the kind of insights you generate from meditating under the caves in Tibet for 10 years is very different from the kind of insights you generate inside a physics laboratory where you're conducting experiments, trying to figure out how did the universe come into existence, and you're using all these, amazing devices for that. So you possibly cannot expect a physicist who's doing this to understand the kind of insights, a meditation coach comes up with, and vice versa. So
Mhm.
I think the same applies here, that someone who's been doing podcasts for 10 years now, for example, Joe Rogan, say, the kind of self-development he's done in his brain is very different from the kind of self-development Stephen King has done by sitting
Mhm.
down and writing for 10 years.
Interesting. Yeah, I that tracks totally. Love that call out there about those two being just different and not necessarily better or worse one than the other. Um, I'm curious about how you went about the entire. So I know there's a plethora of resources available online on publishing, so I don't really want to go into that too much. What's more of kind of an enigma that's less understood is kind of the launch of a certain book. So like, how do you go about preparing? Like hyping it up, having a pre-launch. There's so many different things that at least I saw you did with Unshackled, which I thought were really cool. Fundraising, I feel like also belongs in there. So I guess what can you tell us about how somebody that's looking to self-publish, having checked all the boxes in the checklist for stuff we talked about earlier, so like you figure out all your basics, but what are some tools that you think would be helpful for somebody to really get their names out there and get as many eyeballs on their book as.
Okay. Um, I'm going to assume they're not going through a publisher in this case,
Yes,
that they're doing it
yes,
themselves.
yep.
So, okay, person A has a book that's written. So now let's even assume they found an editor and the book is edited and it's ready to go, it's ready to be printed. Now it's all about sales and marketing. So number one lesson with this is marketing is not the same as sales.
Hmm.
Marketing literally is 100,000 people knowing that your book exists. Sales
Gotcha.
is 100,000 people actually giving their wallet to you,
Hmm.
giving their credit card and making that purchase. So you can have 100,000 people know your book exists and have 1,000 sales, or you can have 10,000 sales. So without going into the nuances there, I think marketing and sales, two different things, number
Yep.
one. And secondly, if you're going to self-publish, I mean, okay, you have two options. Well, okay, you have three options. Number one, go pay a marketing agency. Find a great marketing agency, pay them money, and tell them, hey, I want my book to sell 10,000 copies. I'm
Hmm.
giving you $50,000. Figure it out. Like, help me get this, help me make this
Does that
happen.
not depend on the actual quality of the book at all? Or
Oh, of course, it does. And funnily
okay,
enough, I just got off the call with a book agent who was like explaining certain things to me. And they were telling me that with fiction, quality matters a lot. Like,
really?
people are not going to care who wrote the fiction unless it's, J.K. Rowling. They're not going to care. What the quality of the book really matters. But if it's nonfiction, then they'll care more about who wrote this, what are their
Hmm.
credentials, like,
Yeah,
what skills do they have, and so on. So, but yeah, to answer your question, of course, quality matters, but I'm saying for people to even know your book exists, they have to know your book exists, right? Like they have to first be aware of this, and there is
yeah,
an information overload happening every day to all of us. So, marketing agency is one way.
okay.
The second way is you grow an organic following on
Hmm.
your social media. A lot of people have done this. A lot of creators have grown followings to millions of subscribers, people. Um, I think the most famous example is James Clear, who,
Hmm. Yeah,
when he sold his rights to Penguin, had several 100,000 people on his email list. And so they were all potential buyers for him. So this is also a long-term thing. You slowly grow your following. And even if you have 1 million followers, doesn't mean even 10% of them are going to buy your book. Like, there's a lot
yeah.
more that goes into sales. I'm just talking about marketing right now.
Marketing. Absolutely. Yep.
And I guess the third way would be not to grow through your following, but maybe approaching influencers out there. Like almost being a marketing agency by yourself,
Yeah, I
wherein you
see.
hire a few people, interns, and you ask the interns to go spread the word about your book in different forums where it makes sense. So for Admitted, for example, I could hire interns whose entire job it is to go to Reddit threads, Quora threads, and respond to any question on higher education by mention Admitted and be like, hey, have you checked this book, by the way? It's very helpful. So in this way, you're kind of like doing some hacky things yourself. So yeah, these are some three different
I
pathways
see.
you can take to get your book's word out there. But unless you have a lot of money, like the first pathway, um, it's going to take a lot of effort and time. And I
Right.
want people to be aware of this because the famous like if we build it they will come, like
Hmm.
that is absolutely not true when it comes to publishing and authorship, and it's sadly the fact.
That's super, super helpful. Quick, a few different, I guess, call outs that I've been noting here. The first being, have you tried personally going down the Reddit slash Quora route where you kind of organically try to farm? Well, maybe farm isn't the best word, but direct
Yeah,
traffic to
really,
your.
actually.
Sorry, you have or you?
I've gone the second route. I've not
Okay.
gone the first route. Actually, first route, I've tried working with a marketing agency once
Hmm.
for a smaller project. Didn't really work out for me. I felt like the money was wasted. So, um, I've really just focused on growing organically on social media and using that as a
Makes
platform.
sense. Yeah, so the reason I asked that was because I had a similar, and hopefully this isn't too much of a tangent, but when I was trying to, I guess I'm still trying to kind of put my name out there. I'm only 15 episodes deep at the time of recording this. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go to Reddit, let's go to Quora. All of my latest video topics that are related, I'm just going to spam it over there and hope for the best. Well, Reddit straight up bans your links. They don't like it if you do that at all. Like it's just automatically banned. Quora, apparently nobody on earth uses it anymore. So both of those were admittedly dead ends for me, at least. Maybe I didn't do it well enough or gave up too early. But agreeing to your point, I guess what I'm getting at is it largely appears to me that having an organic social following might actually probably be for the average Joe out there, probably the best course of action. I'm not sure if you would agree.
Maybe. I am hesitant to agree to that because maybe the average Joe out there doesn't care for social media, doesn't care in promoting themselves. Um, I mean, if you're saying, because even to grow on social media, I mean, you have to treat it like a job. It's not going to work if you think of it as, oh, I'll just make one post a week on LinkedIn. I'll make
Mm.
one post a week on Instagram, one video on YouTube a week.
Mhm.
No, I mean, the algorithm is hungry for consistent content. Like
Mhm.
only after you do that over a certain period of time, it'll start picking up. Instagram will notice that, okay, this person has posted every day for the last 6 months, or has posted every other day for the last 3 months. So they're serious about it. Maybe we'll make one of their reels go viral so that they get that dopamine hit and they keep coming back and posting.
Yeah.
So I think, and a lot of people honestly don't enjoy that. I mean,
Yeah, that's
even
a
in my
that's a fair
case,
point.
it's a necessary, I wouldn't say necessary evil as much as, um, would I rather be reading a new book and learning something and growing as a person versus making a video sharing something that I already know?
Mhm.
Probably the former. But I also understand that on the longer scale, would I rather write books that no one reads, or would I rather
That's what
write
I
books
was
that
going to
read?
get at. Yeah, because the
So,
book you referenced that you would be rather reading, what if you had never found out about that book in the first place? Then you wouldn't be reading that book. So yeah, it's
yeah.
like a chicken and egg a little bit.
So I guess that's why I'm hesitant to say the average Joe should take that route. Because, but yeah, if you're saying, okay, let's assume the person has no money. I
Hmm?
mean, if that's the constraint, no money, they have no following on social media. Now they have to figure out how do I get the word out there. I think honestly, in that case, while it should be do both, meaning slowly grow your following, but also in the meantime, reach out to other influencers out there, reach out to other communities where your readers are, and try to, I guess in the beginning, you're going to have to ask for a favor because
Yeah,
there's nothing you can offer in return. But hopefully, you will find a few generous people who are willing to take that chance on you. You can you can try to make it slightly valuable for them by telling them, like, by offering what you can. It's a tricky. I mean, now we've come to another topic entirely, which is how do you ask for help from
mhm,
people when you
yeah,
have not much to
cold
offer?
outreach.
Yeah. Um, we can talk about that if you want, but that's a different topic. So I don't want to get into that right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess if you could touch on it. So I'm sure you would have had to do a fair amount of cold outreach to do all of this, all of these various things you've accomplished. So I guess, yeah, I am trying to understand if you have any tips or tricks that you've learned around maybe a template that you found from somewhere that was particularly handy. But yeah, really any outline tips around cold outreach itself that anybody can use.
Definitely. Um, Cold outreach. Okay. So I've done a ton of cold outreach, by the way. I've done
Right.
cold outreaches for raising money, for getting, people to help with something. I want to think of a scenario. Okay, let's assume we're talking to someone who has a book written out. You, for example, you have an admitted like book that you've
Okay.
written in the next 6 months. You don't have the money to work with the agency. You don't have a following, assuming. Now, how do you get the
True
word
enough.
out there? So your job, I would say, would be obviously make a list of the 10 influencers in this area, study abroad. Actually, make a list of 25. Like, why 10? Like, make a long list. And it may not be easy for you to get in touch with the number one influencer who
Hmm.
has, say, millions of subscribers. And for the sake of example, let's actually take Harnoor Singh. Harnoor Singh is, probably the most um, popular study abroad
Yeah.
slash someone who's an immigrant who came to this country. It may not be easy to get in touch with him because he has a team of people and he is, his time is like very sparse and he's doing many things. So you may want to start off with someone who is in the 25th on the list, who has 20,000 people on their LinkedIn, equally interested in growing as you are. And at that point, you're saying, okay, let's reach out to them with a compelling pitch. But even then, if you literally just say, hey, I just published this book, admitted like book. Can you please promote this on your channel? There's no way they're going to respond. And if they did, they are probably doing it, out of their very, very good heart. But most people are not going to do that.
Absolutely.
So now you have to think, what would they care about? So I would go to their profile on LinkedIn. I would go through a few of their posts. I would start to engage with them in the comment section by like supporting them. I might, for example, let's say they talk a lot about latest news and developments in the field of immigration. I would send them news that I come across so that they're aware of it, and add some value so that they recognize me from the noise first.
Yeah.
And anyone can do the things I just said. You don't have to have any sort of skills to do what I just said. So then I would at some point reach out and say, hey, I've been working on this for a year, put a lot of effort into this, and I genuinely think it could help some of the people in your community. Is there any way in which I can promote this? I am cash strapped. I'm a student. I don't have the money right now, but I can help you in these following ways. And so just
amazing.
That's how you should approach. Not like first, let's go like, hey, can you help me? And then do that to 100 people and bombard people with help requests.
I love how actionable that was. I guess to just kind of tie the loop on really this little fun conversation. I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on your you getting the O-1 visa. So I'm trying to understand if so like did you already know about the O-1 visa and that kind of maybe was the catalyst for writing the book, or if you found that way later and it was just like a happy bonus that you were able to use. I'm actually assuming that the book helped you or can help somebody get an O-1 visa. So a lot of assumptions baked in there, but really just trying to understand kind of your O-1 visa journey and how a book
Yeah,
can or cannot help with that front.
right. Okay. There are some assumptions there, but I'll come to that. Number one, I knew of the O-1 early 2021 itself. I filed the O-1 after admitted.
Okay.
Early 2022 is when I filed my first O-1 application. I got an RFE, request for evidence, responded to that, and then they sent me a denial notice in May 2022. So I had been wanting to write a short book on immigration for a while. I was literally just waiting for the O-1 to come through so I could do that.
I see.
So that number one, I was able to do it. Number two, I had the authority to talk about immigration. But of course, it didn't come through. I also realized maybe I shouldn't let that stop me. What if I could work with a lawyer on this? Like someone who has far more experience than me, someone who can add the legal authority to this book. And so, fortunately, I approached Samir and he agreed to work with me on Unshackled. And so, yeah, I knew about the O-1 before I began Unshackled, to answer your question. Did I write Unshackled to get the O-1? Absolutely not. I mean, I didn't even know that writing Unshackled would help me get the O-1. In
That's
fact,
what I was getting at. Yeah.
I thought it would hurt me since I'm literally writing a book that criticizes the immigration system. And then I'm reaching out to a US officer and being like, hey, can you give me the O-1, by the way? In fact, in my O-1 application, obviously Unshackled is mentioned, but it only takes up less than 10% of the evidence in terms of like even I would say less than 5%.
Interesting.
So does writing a book help you get the O-1? Oh gosh. Mostly no, I would actually say. I'm not going to say yes to that because the O-1 is a talent visa. They have very rigid requirements. You have to meet 3 out of 8 criteria, or 9 criteria if you count comparable evidence as one. One of the criteria is scholarly articles, which is you publishing a scholarly article in a journal out there or a publication that is reasonably reputed in your field. So you can see how self-publishing a book does not qualify because you're just
Right.
self-publishing. Anyone can do that.
Right.
But let's say you have a book that you self-published, which has been read 10,000 times by people. You have awesome reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and you have experts in the field who've made posts about your book. There, I think you can start to say, okay, you know what? Even though I self-published, look at all of these evidences that show you why my book is
Yeah,
important.
the press, right? Because I think one of the 8 categories is associated press on your work.
Yeah.
Would that
So
qualify?
if you get press on the book, it could help for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm
Exactly.
just saying, self-publishing a book on its own, not
Right.
going to help.
Makes sense.
You have to do a bunch of other things to make sure why your book is extraordinary. And so,
Interesting. And then to, I guess, final question, what can you tell us about your next venture? I don't know, it feels weird to call it a venture, but your next
venture.
writing.
Right.
um, and I think
Yeah.
you reference you're moving into fiction. Was that?
Yeah. I mean, it's fiction inspired by true events, still
Ooh,
fiction,
that's the best
but
type of
it's kind
fiction.
of an interesting one leg here, one leg there that I'm doing. Um, the next book that I'm working on is called Thousand Days of Love. It's a novel inspired by true experience that happened in my life in the last 3 years, especially after I met someone called Rajesh Sethi.
Hmm?
Rajesh is a third parent, a best friend, a teacher to me. Um, he's the person that I call when I get good news or bad news. He's the person that I talk to every single day for like 5 times. So he changed my life. And this, in so many ways, is a book telling him thank you for what he's done for me. But it's also a
Wow.
way for me to push myself as a writer. It's a way for me to help put this into the world so that there can be more Rajeshes, so that there can be more people out there who help each other and who show what true compassion feels like. And so there's many whys behind why I'm
Hmm.
doing this, but I don't expect the book to be published for the next 18 months, by the way,
Okay.
because I'm still very much in the early process of writing it properly. And
Hmm.
after I write, I want to find a publisher, and the publisher has their own timeline. So it might not be
Hmm.
out into the market for until 2026. But yeah, I'm very excited to work on it.
Yeah, it'll be funny once it drops for us to come back and listen to this, because then you can
I
be like,
know.
that's what I was thinking of at the time, because I know there can be so many pivots slash obviously many pivots, but it's just something that I really like to do, which is to go back and look at something I wrote about something 2 years
Absolutely.
later, and it's just so cool to me. Like, I just really love that. And I guess, what can you tell us about your vacation? I guess it's not a vacation, but more like a write-cation that's upcoming in London. I only know that because
Vacation.
of your LinkedIn post. I thought that was really cool that you had to be shortlisted. It seemed like a really huge deal. So what can you tell
Oh,
us about
thanks.
that?
It's definitely not vacation, number one. I don't really care for vacations. I actually love enjoying like writing and creating
Hmm.
things. So it's a 6 month long novel writing course
Okay.
that's launched by Faber and Faber, which is a big publishing house in the UK. They pick 15 they call serious writers from across the world and help them go through this program. I'm very happy that I got picked as one of them. And so I'm moving there in September. I got the UK Global Talent Visa, which I'm actually launching tomorrow online across social media. So I'm saying it now itself because I'm sure it'll come after tomorrow, this podcast. So
It will.
I got, yeah, I got approved for something called the UK Global Talent Visa, which is
Wow,
pretty highly
congratulations.
coveted UK visa, actually. Thank you. And it's kind of like the EB1 in the US in some ways. So like
Hmm.
or O-1 slash EB1 in the US. And so, yeah, I'm moving there in September, and that'll be my main focus to work on this book, to finish the book, and find a publisher.
And do they kind of like make sure you're in the right setting, like mentorship, all of that? Is it kind of like a complete package that they help writers with, or is
Absolutely.
it okay?
So, 6 months, you have 15 people who are all giving each other feedback,
Okay.
and you have 3 to 4 professors, and these teachers are novelists themselves. They're multi-novelists. They've published 4 or 5 fiction books so far, and they also bring in a lot of renowned guest authors. into the work, like to do workshops every month, and they put you in front of top agents in the UK at the end of the program for your book.
I see. That's so exciting. It almost sounds like a writing version of Y Combinator, if you will, where you're
It is.
okay.
I should just say that from now. Like it's like YC for writers. That's
Yeah,
it.
I mean that's exactly what it sounds like. But Soundarya, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been so amazing to interact with you, and I'm really excited for your next book, even though I know you said there's a decent amount of time. But it sounds really amazing, and I'm so excited to,
Thank you.
read not just that, but all the other books that I'm sure you will continue to come up with for us.
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about this with you.
That brings us to the end of episode 22 of the Ready Set Do podcast. Thank you all for sharing these episodes with those that continue to benefit from them. If you would like to support me, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing to my YouTube channel and or leaving me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify. For any feedbacks or suggestions or guest recommendations, my YouTube comments are the go-to area. I always read every comment, so thank you all so much for leaving those. New episodes every Wednesday. Catch you all in the next one.